This story is very meaningful. Everyone should hear it. Listen to Brian tell the story. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears as I stood in the middle of the wedding hall, gripping the microphone tighter than I ever had. My hands felt cold, but my body was burning with something I had never let out before. Anger, frustration, months of humiliation boiling over all at once. And now, finally, the moment had arrived. I cleared my throat. Thank you all for being here today, I began, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. My fiancé, Liam, smiled at me, his eyes filled with nothing but love and pride. He had no idea what was coming next. I took a deep breath. I want to especially thank my husband's family for welcoming me, I said, my voice smooth, warm. Then I switched languages. The room went silent. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Liam's mother, who had spent months pretending I wasn't worthy of being part of this family, froze in place, her face drained of color. I smiled. Thank you, mother-in-law, for giving me the motivation to learn your language, I said, watching her expression twist. Because of you, I have spent months studying, and now I understand everything. She opened her mouth, then shut it. I understand every insult. Every time you laughed at me, every time you said I wasn't good enough, that I was ruining your family, that I was unworthy of your son. Gasps turned to murmurs. Liam looked at me, stunned. I heard you when you told your relatives I was infertile, when you said I would never be a good mother, when you mocked my wedding dress, my skin, my hair. She flinched. And let me make something very clear, I continued, my voice never shaking, never breaking. If you ever treat me this way again, you will never see your grandchildren. Dead silence. Liam reached for my hand. I love your son, I said, softer now. And I love this family, but I will not let you tear me down anymore. His mother stood, her face red with fury, her hands clenched into fists, but she didn't say a word. I turned back to the guests. Thank you, everyone, I finished, placing the microphone back down. And then I walked off the stage, feeling lighter than I ever had before. Liam and I met in college. He was studying business. I was in international relations. He had this warm, boyish charm to him, a kindness that was effortless. We fell into love like it was the easiest thing in the world. But love isn't always enough. His mother had made it clear from the very beginning that I wasn't what she wanted for her son. I still remember the first time I met her. We had gone to their home for dinner. I was nervous but excited. I had spent hours picking out my outfit, making sure I looked respectful, elegant, presentable. But the moment I stepped through the door, I felt it. She didn't greet me, didn't look at me. Liam smiled, introduced me, his hand warm on my back. Mom, Dad, this is... She turned away before he could even finish. I forced a smile. It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Nothing. She ignored me completely. Liam hesitated, looking between us. His father, a quiet gentleman, gave me a small nod, but his mother? She just started speaking in her language, rapid and sharp, addressing Liam as if I wasn't even there. I didn't know the words then, but I knew what exclusion felt like. The whole dinner went on like that. I sat there eating quietly while she spoke to Liam and his father, not once acknowledging my existence. When I reached for a dish, she took it and served her husband and son first, making sure I was last. Liam was furious. On the way home, he kept apologizing. I don't know why she's like this, he muttered, running a hand through his hair. She's never done this before. I'm so sorry, baby. If she doesn't change, we won't see her as much, I promise. But she didn't change. If anything, she got worse. At every gathering, every family event, she whispered in her language, pointing at me, laughing with her relatives. She would stare at my hair, my skin, my clothes, and say things that made Liam's jaw tighten, his hands ball into fists. But he never told me what she said. It doesn't matter, he would say. She's wrong, you don't need to know. But I did need to know, so I learned. In secret, every night I studied. I watched videos, practiced speaking, memorized words. And then one day I understood. We were at his cousin's wedding. I was standing by the drinks table when I heard her. She was speaking to one of her relatives, looking right at me. She's not even that pretty. Her nose is huge. Her hair is a mess. I don't know what he sees in her. I didn't react. I just smiled, picked up my drink, and walked away. After that, I kept listening. I heard her tell Liam that our marriage was doomed, that I would never fit in, that I was white, and that was all that mattered. But I stayed silent. I waited. Until the wedding, until I could give her the one thing she never expected. Revenge. But not the kind that involved shouting. No, I wanted her to feel what I had felt. Out of place. Helpless. Unprepared. And when I saw her face that day, when she realized I had understood every single word she had ever spoken about me, I knew I had won. But winning doesn't always mean the war is over. Because 2 weeks later, she called me. Again, again, again. I ignored it at first, but then Liam sat down next to me, took my hand and said, "Baby, I think you should meet her, just once." I stared at him. "After everything?" "Just once," he said softly. "If she hasn't changed, you never have to see her again." So I met her at a small cafe, neutral ground. When I walked in, she looked different, nervous, unsure. She opened her mouth. And for the first time, in a voice I barely recognized, she said, "I was wrong." I didn't say anything. "I was angry," she continued, staring down at her hands. "But I shouldn't have treated you that way." I studied her. Was it real? Was it guilt or just embarrassment? I didn't know, but I said, "Okay," because sometimes that's the best place to start. And a year later, when I handed her my newborn daughter, when she looked down at her grandchild with tears in her eyes, I knew that somehow, against all odds, we had both won. But peace is fragile, especially with someone like her. For months after my daughter was born, things seemed better. Not perfect, but better. She held the baby with careful hands, softer than I'd ever seen them. She started inviting us over, asking questions about my pregnancy, my health. For a while, I thought we had finally reached some kind of understanding. But old habits die hard. One evening, we were at her house. Liam was outside helping his father fix something, and I was in the living room rocking the baby to sleep. She sat across from me, sipping tea. Then in the same language I had spent so long learning, she said, "You should be grateful. If you didn't have this child, Liam might have left you by now." The words hit me like a slap. I turned my head slowly, my stomach twisting. "What?" She looked at me, completely unfazed. "A man like Liam needs a strong family. Before, I didn't think you could give him that. Now at least you have some use." Use, like I was just a vessel. I gripped the armrest of the chair, trying to stay calm, trying not to wake the baby. "So that's what you think? That this child is the only reason he's with me?" She sipped her tea. "Men are practical. Love fades. Children keep them tied down." I clenched my jaw. "Liam loves me, not because of our daughter, not because of anything other than the fact that we belong together." She hummed like she didn't believe me. "We'll see," she murmured. And that was the moment I realized this wasn't over. She had played nice because she thought I had finally met her standards. But in her mind, I was still just the outsider who had trapped her son in a marriage she never wanted. And she was waiting, waiting for me to fail, waiting for me to prove her right. I refused to give her that satisfaction. But the more I tried to ignore her, the more she pushed. Small things at first, passive-aggressive comments, backhanded compliments. "You're getting better at cooking our food. Almost as good as the real thing. Your daughter has my son's nose, thank God. Your home is different. Not how we would do it, but it's fine." Liam didn't always catch it. He wanted to believe things were fine, but I felt it. The little digs, the subtle jabs, the way she looked at me like she was just waiting for me to prove I didn't belong. But then one night, she went too far. We were at another family gathering, a big one. Relatives everywhere, eating, drinking, laughing. I was in the kitchen carrying my daughter when I overheard her speaking to one of her sisters. "She doesn't deserve him," she was saying, her voice low but firm. "She's trying, but she'll never be one of us. Liam will see it eventually. He'll come to his senses." The sister murmured something back, something I couldn't hear. Then, "If he ever leaves her, I'll make sure she doesn't take my granddaughter with her." My breath caught in my throat. "What?" "No, no, she wouldn't." I tightened my hold on my daughter, my heart hammering in my chest. I had let so much go. I had tried to be patient. But this was war. I turned the corner and stepped into the room, my expression calm, my voice cold. Is that so? She stiffened. Her sister turned, eyes wide. I walked closer. You think Liam will leave me? You think you can take my daughter from me? She didn't speak, but her face said enough. Listen carefully, I said, my voice unwavering. If you ever try to interfere in my marriage again, if you ever try to turn my husband against me, or think for a second that you have any claim to my child, I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You will never see either of them again. Silence. She stared at me, anger flashing in her eyes. But I didn't care. I turned on my heel, walking away. When I found Liam, he took one look at me and frowned. What happened? I looked at him, at the man I had built a life with, and I realized it was time for a choice. I couldn't keep living like this. Either she accepted me fully, completely, or she lost us both. I took a deep breath. We need to talk, I said. Liam sat beside me into the car, his fingers laced through mine as I stared out the window, my mind still spinning from everything that had just happened. I had drawn my line, and now it was time to see if she would cross it. The next morning she called. I let it ring. Again, again. Liam watched me from across the room, concern in his eyes. Are you going to answer? I shook my head. Not yet. For the first time, I wasn't scrambling to fix things, to prove myself, to try and earn her respect. I'd already done enough. 2 days later, she showed up at our door. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. She hesitated before stepping inside, scanning the house, her lips pressing into a thin line. You really won't let me see my granddaughter? I met her gaze, steady. Not if you keep treating me like this. Her mouth opened, then closed. She swallowed. I never wanted to lose my son. Her voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. I studied her carefully. Then why did you spend so much time trying to make me feel like I didn't belong? She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. Because I was afraid. I raised an eyebrow. Afraid? Afraid that you would take him away from us, that he would change, forget where he came from. She looked down, hands twisting in her lap. But I see now that I pushed too hard, and I might have lost him anyway. My chest tightened. She wasn't completely wrong. Liam had been pulling away, not from me, but from her. He had reached his own breaking point, and she knew it. So what now? I asked. She sighed, looking older than I had ever seen her. I don't know. Well, no, and maybe that was the most honest thing she had ever said to me. I didn't forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But for the first time, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Regret. Maybe she had spent too many years clinging to old ways of thinking. Maybe she had been too stubborn to see what was right in front of her. But now she was losing everything. Liam came into the room then, our daughter in his arms. Her eyes flickered to the baby, softening. Can I? I didn't move. But Liam did. He nodded, stepping forward, placing our daughter in her arms. And for the first time, she held her granddaughter without bitterness, without resentment. Just love. It didn't erase everything she had done. It didn't mean everything would be fine overnight. But it was something, maybe, just maybe, enough to build on. And maybe, for the first time in her life, she had finally learned that love is not about control. It's not about traditions or bloodlines or power. It's about choice. And this time it was her turn to choose. Will she finally change? Or will she lose us forever? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. And if you've ever dealt with a difficult mother-in-law, share your story below. I'd love to hear it. Liam sat beside me as the door clicked shut behind his mother. The house felt eerily quiet, like the space between words in a conversation that had yet to finish. I looked at him, searching his face for answers, for direction, for something to anchor me in the storm that had been brewing between his mother and me for far too long. What now? I asked softly. He exhaled, rubbing his hands over his face. I don't know, he admitted, but I do know that I'm not going to let her keep hurting you. His words warmed something deep inside me, something that had been frayed and fragile for months. But still, I wasn't sure what to feel. His mother had spent so long making me feel unwanted, you know, so long trying to tear me down. I had finally stood up for myself, and for the first time, she had listened. But was it enough? Days passed. I expected another call, another visit, another attempt to control us, but none came. Instead, I got something else, a letter. It arrived in a small envelope, tucked between the bills and junk mail. I turned it over in my hands, my fingers hesitating over the crease. Liam watched me silent, waiting. Slowly, I opened it. The handwriting was careful, as if she had rewritten it many times before settling on this final version. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I froze, rereading the first line over and over again. I never meant to become the kind of mother who pushes her son away. I thought I was protecting him, protecting our family. I thought I was doing what was right. But I see now that I was wrong. I see that my fear made me cruel. I see that I hurt you, and for that, I am deeply sorry. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. I don't expect you to believe me. I don't expect things to be okay overnight. But I do want to try. I want to be better, not just for Liam, not just for my granddaughter, but for you too. You have shown me strength in a way I never understood before. You love my son with everything you have. You fight for your family. And maybe, if you are willing, you can teach me how to fight for mine the right way. I hope one day you can let me in, but until then, I will wait. Mother-in-law. I blinked back, the sting in my eyes. What does it say? Liam asked gently. I handed him the letter, watching as he read, his jaw tightening, his expression unreadable. Do you believe her? He finally asked. I let out a slow breath. I don't know, but I wanted to. For so long, I had held on to my anger, my resentment, my exhaustion, and I had every right to. But there was a part of me, small but real, that wanted to believe people could change, that wanted to believe she could change. So I took a chance. I wrote back, not a long letter, just a few words. If you truly want to try, I'm willing to try too. The next week she came over. She didn't walk in like she owned the place. She didn't make a comment about my cooking or my house or my parenting. She just stood at the door, eyes searching mine, waiting. I stepped aside, letting her in. We sat down at the kitchen table, awkward at first, but then she pulled out an old photo of Liam as a child, laughing in his father's arms. He was always stubborn, she said softly, just like his father. I smiled, looking at the picture. He still is. And just like that, a bridge formed between us. Fragile, unsteady, but there. Not built on forced politeness, not built on fear, but on the choice to try. Over time, she didn't become the perfect mother-in-law. She still slipped up, still made comments that stung, still struggled with old habits. But she apologized. She tried, and that was enough. One night, months later, I found her in the nursery, rocking my daughter to sleep. She looked up at me, a soft smile on her face. She looks like you, she whispered. It was the first time she had ever said that. I didn't say anything. I just sat down beside her, watching as my daughter slept, her tiny chest rising and falling. Maybe love wasn't instant, maybe it wasn't easy, but it was a choice, and in that moment, for the first time, I chose to let go of the past. I chose to believe in second chances. I chose family. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. And if you've ever dealt with a difficult mother-in-law, share your story below. I'd love to hear it.